Welcome to the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, episode number 208. If you can talk brilliantly about a problem, it can create a consoling illusion that it has been mastered. Stanley Kubrick.
Broadcasting from the back alley in Hollywood, it's the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, where we show you how to survive and thrive as an indie filmmaker in the jungles of the film biz. And here's your host, Alex Ferrari.
Welcome, my Indie Film Hustlers, to another episode of the Indie Film Hustle Podcast. I am your humble host, Alex Ferrari. Today's show is sponsored by Video Blocks. Now, guys, when I was shooting my show for Legendary Pictures, and I did that 96 pages in 4 days, I actually got into post and we used a lot of stock footage, stock sounds, and even some graphics from Video Blocks. They are an amazing resource. With your membership, you are granted the rights to use that footage forever, in perpetuity, on any projects you want to. So if you want to try a 7-day free trial, and by the way, anything you download during those 7 days is yours to keep. And if you decide to stay, you get 84% off the yearly membership. It is well worth it, guys. Trust me, if you do a lot of production, it is something you really need. So just head over to videoblocks.com/hustle. So sorry I'm a little bit late, guys. I got hit with the Christmas flu. My daughter gave me a early Christmas gift. And even a hustler like myself gets knocked down by the flu every once in a blue moon. But I am back, and today we have an insanely cool episode. I am talking to one of the OGs, the original gangsters of the filmmaking blogosphere, Philip Bloom. Now, if you guys don't know who Philip Bloom is, Google him because he has been around since the early 2000s. He's one of the first filmmaking bloggers out there. He has a massive online empire, if you will. He's worked with George Lucas, shot the movie Red Tails with him on a Canon 5D when it first came out. He also travels the world as an award-winning cinematographer. And over the years, I've learned a ton from his YouTube channel, his blog, and all the cool stuff that he puts out there for the filmmaking community. And I am honored and humbled that he would come on the podcast to share his experience and knowledge with the tribe. And there'll be a little surprise for you at the end of this episode. Philip's got this brand new insane course that he's got called Philip Bloom's Cinematic Masterclass. And I will have a link at the end of this episode where you guys can go and check it out. It is almost 10 hours long. It is definitely a masterclass. I have taken a bunch of it already, and I've learned a few things along the way as well. So definitely check that out. But without any further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Philip Bloom. I'd like to welcome to the show Philip Bloom. Thank you, sir, so much for taking the time out to share your knowledge with the tribe.
Hi, Alex. Thanks for having me.
So how did you get into this crazy business?
A path which probably doesn't exist anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It goes back to, I think most times when you're growing up and you don't know what to do. And I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember watching a TV show, and it was about a guy who tried out different careers. And one episode was where he tried to be a news photographer. Mm-hmm. And I watched that. And this was like in the sort of like mid 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that looks really cool. So a friend of my dad's knew a press photographer. And so I had a conversation with him about it. And I took photos. I was, a hobbyist,
mm-hmm.
nothing particularly serious, but I took photos. But I thought that looks like a really interesting job because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And then he said to me, I would not bother doing this because photography is on the way out, because digital is coming in, and that's going to change everything. It's going to cheapen the industry. You should get into TV news. That's where the future is. Mm-hmm. So I went, yeah, why not? So I then sort of like made inquiries and contacts and tried to get in touch with somebody, and eventually found somebody who knew somebody, and I managed to go out with a news crew. I must have been about 16 or 17, did that for the day. And it was the best thing I'd ever done. It was so much fun. Mm-hmm. And this was back in the golden age of TV news in a way, because where you were really looked after. I think they did I went out with them. It was like a 3-man crew. We went out to the press conference for a boxer. Mm-hmm. Then we had a 3-hour lunch. and a Chinese restaurant, a really expensive Chinese restaurant, all on the company. And I was like, wow, this is amazing.
This is the life.
And then I think they said, we may do something later, but probably not. That'll be it for the day. I'm like, this is a job? Wow. So I did, and eventually by the time I left school, I then managed to get my foot into the door into Sky Television and to try and become a news cameraman. So that's kind of how I got in. Never wanted to be use that word filmmaker. I never wanted to be a filmmaker in the slightest. Wanted to find a job that could pay me to do something that was interesting. Because I really had no idea what I wanted to do growing up. And that was basically, I just sort of fell into it. Just found that I really enjoyed filming and really enjoyed the excitement and boredom as well of news. And that's kind of where it went, really. And I did that for 17 years.
Oh, wow.
I was working for staff. And it was the best training anybody, I think, you can have if you want to become a storyteller, because I learned how to use gear, not particularly technically, because it was much simpler times. It was one camera, one lens,
right? Two settings,
a couple of lights. That's it. It was like, there's no settings in camera. It's turn it on, and you had a gain switch. There you go.
Yes, white balance. Don't forget the white balance.
So yeah, white balance, and of course it was black and white viewfinder, so you had to get it right. Right. You knew you got it right because you didn't get a phone call later to tell you that you got it wrong.
Right.
So that's kind of the way things worked back then. But it was brilliant. It was great training. I got to learn how to tell stories really quickly. I learned how to shoot efficiently, how to walk into a room and see the positions where I need to be. I learned how to figure out what shots I needed to get really quickly. And then they gave me a chance to do long form stuff later on. And I was always traveling around the world, and they taught me how to edit. It was just a really brilliant experience. And I guess it's one of those things that when you I got really comfortable with it, and I could easily still be doing it now, but I realized that I had to leave to push myself further. And that was 11 years ago.
And that's when I am
now.
And then you got into more filmmaking, more documentary after that?
Yeah. I mean, documentaries is kind of what I was doing for the last few years of my staff job anyway, because I was one of the few cameramen. There was like 25 cameramen that worked at the company on the news roster, and I was one of the few who edited. And so I got sent to do the interesting stories. And then they gave me the more creative stuff, and I showed a flair for doing creative stuff. And so they pushed me to more and more and do that. And then, so I was doing the longer form stuff, sort of like what you equate to like 60 minutes types that you have. And that was brilliant. So that really gave me the taste for longer stuff of doing that. So that's when I went into freelancing. That's why I really wanted to still push forward with documentaries as my main thing. It is still my main thing, but also try the other things which interested me, and I certainly found that trying all these different things and still doing different types of work really helps in every aspect. If you're filming narrative fiction, coming from a news documentary background is incredibly useful because you have that speed of thought. But also, if what you can take from narrative fiction though is that aspect of planning and working with others in a much more controlled way, and bringing that into your documentary work can have a really interesting effect. So I love the way that everything that I've done in these past 11 years has really sort of gelled and worked together to make everything hopefully better.
Now, at what point in your career did you decide, hey, I'm going to start blogging, I'm going to open up a YouTube YouTube channel? I mean, you're one of the first guys in the industry, in the film industry at all, that was kind of figuring that out. How did you start this blog, and what made you want to start one?
So I think the website started initially, this was in 2006, just as a place for my showreel, because prior to this, people were just, and still at this time, were sending out DVDs or CD-ROMs.
Or VHS.
Or VHSs, and the effort it takes for somebody to open it up and put it in a machine and play it, it means they're not going to watch it. And I just thought, if I could just send them a link over this thing called email that everybody seems to start having these days, And that's what basically it was just seemed like the most obvious way of doing things, and that's basically what it started as. And then about a year later, I started up the blog, and the blog was just a simple way of me sharing my experiences using something called 35mm adapters, which is what we used before DSLRs. It was a way of tricking these smaller sensor cameras into having essentially 35mm field of view and aesthetic and everything. And it was a really clunky but clever system.
Yeah, I remember.
And the only way you could find out information about these really was by going through all of these forums, the DVX users and the DV infos and stuff like that. And it was going through countless threads. And I thought, I'm just going to have a place where I can just share my experience with it and see I can hopefully help people out if they're thinking of going down this path, and they can see me trying out all these gears, all these different adapters that I'm buying, trying to get the most filmic look. And it was simply my it sounds a bit trite, but it is true. I did actually just want to give a little bit back, because I was trained by such brilliant cameramen back in my news days. And I just wanted to have, I was taught, I was educated on the job and stuff like that. And I could already see the way things were going, that wasn't happening anymore. And people were sort of floundering. So I just wanted to just share my experiences. And so hopefully people could learn a little bit from what I was doing. And that's kind of really basically what it started out as, just simply me giving a little bit back. And
then it grew and grew and grew till it's the juggernaut that it is today. And your YouTube. And when did you start your YouTube channel?
YouTube's a funny one. I mean, it started a long time ago. I can't even remember how long ago, but it must be about 9.
At least like 2010, 2008, something like that.
Oh, well, before then, yeah. So I didn't really do much with it. It was just a place of putting up some stuff. And really, I have to say, I mean, Vimeo was kind of my main place. There was Exposure Room and then Vimeo. Exposure Room disappeared. And Vimeo, and I used to use that as a place to put my work up to be seen, because nice and clean platform. YouTube always struck me as a very noisy environment.
Yep.
And I've actually grown to love YouTube for what it is. I've embraced it for what it is. And it took me quite a few years to understand what needs to be done with it. And I've never really embraced it in the full way that many have, because I think to truly do that, it's a full-time job. That hence you're a YouTuber for me. So it's just, I put up stuff every now and then, but and I'm not a snob at all about these things. And you see this online when you talk about these things. People when they say, "Oh no, I don't put my stuff on YouTube." The quality of the people who watch it aren't anywhere near as good as quality people who watch it on Vimeo. I'm like, right. So you want to pick and choose your audience? Well, you're in the wrong business.
Right.
You want everybody to watch it, surely. You want as many people to watch it as possible. So, and YouTube is, for me, has now grown bigger for me than Vimeo. I still use Vimeo initially to put my stuff up, and then when I'm happy with it, I will then put it up onto YouTube, because, as you know, you can't change the video on YouTube. You have to just let it go. And it's not like I do daily vlogs or anything. It's when I put stuff up on YouTube, it's generally quite a crafted piece that I put up there. So it takes me a while to make it.
So when you approach a film or a series, how do you approach it? How do you kind of like creatively go after a new job?
That's a tricky one, because it really depends on the type of work I do is so varied. And generally the way that work, I'm lucky enough to be in a position now where I don't have to actually knock on doors as such to find work. I still make new contacts and do things like that, just the normal way. But I don't send I don't try and contact people looking for work. I get people contacting me with job offers and ideas, and if it's something that interests me, then I'll go and work with it. And it really depends on what the job is. It's such a different process, whether it's working on a documentary series or doing a corporate or branded content, for example. I mean, all of these things have such different processes. Obviously, there's some parts of it which are very similar, which is, I think, the common ground on all of it would be filming. Because on everything that I do, I'll always be filming something. But on other stuff, I may not be editing. I may not be doing any pre-production. It really depends on type of thing that I do.
Now, you shoot a lot on location. Do you have any tips on lighting with natural light?
Yeah. Lighting, natural lighting is a wonderful thing. It's an unpredictable, uncontrollable thing frequently. And so whilst working with what there is a nice, quick way of doing things, you can't use it for everything. It's the best thing I can suggest when you are working with available. I mean, I would always suggest having your own light as well. If you're going to try and do talking heads and interviews in a room, trying to do that on just available light or natural light, unless you've got continuous grey cloud outside or anything like that, it's just going to be a nightmare. But it is a case of working with what's there. Don't fight it. Embrace the light. Find a location or room with a background that works with the windows and what there is. When you walk into a room that has lights on, turn them off and then see what the light's like and then turn the back on again if you want. So it's a case of just don't turn the camera on until you've figured out where the light is and how you can harness it. And I think too many people don't look at where the light is before they choose their background first, and then they go, oh, what about the light? The two should be hand in hand, especially if you're going to be working with natural light. You need to make it work together very well.
It's not. It's in other words, kind of roll with the punches when it comes to natural light, as opposed to trying to control it or manipulate it too much. I mean, you can control and manipulate it to a certain extent, but it's ever changing. So it's kind of like, wrestling a wet cat.
Yeah, it depends on what it is you're trying to film. If you're just trying to grab some shots here and there, it's, you can work with it. And lighting is not turning up the ISO on your camera, as you know. That is a completely different thing. And
right.
Horrendous to think that some people actually do think that is what lighting is. No, we still need to. Lighting, obviously, creates the mood. It creates everything. And I love natural light, but when the natural light doesn't work for me, which can easily be 75% of the time, that's when you start adding light to yourself, but in the most naturalistic way possible for me. It's all about finding the position where your lights can be looks like it's a motivated light source, like it could be the window. And that's what I could be doing. I could literally just be putting up a light to add to the window light, to take it over, to add a little bit more to it, to give it a bit more sparkle in case it changes. So I think that's kind of what you need to do with it. And there's lots of apps and things out there which you can use to see, if you want to scout locations beforehand and see where the sun will be, the light will be, and how that will affect things. But most of the time, if you're just doing things quickly, you just have to work with it and just be quick is my best advice. If you are going to work with natural light, don't faff around and start being undecided about what you're going to do. You just have to just go with it.
Now, I know because I actually watched your Skywalker Ranch video that you did years ago, which was stunning. And for any Star Wars fan, that is Mecca. So I watched it. I found it online. I was like, wow. And then you were shooting it with a DSLR, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah. So that was an interesting time. So that was back in 2009, and they contacted me, and it's a nice story because I'm a huge Star Wars fan, have been ever since I saw the first Star Wars back in '77, and they emailed me, and I didn't reply. So Lucasfilm emailed me, and I didn't reply because I'm terrible with emails. And I have a PA now, and it makes things better. But she does my work email. She doesn't do my personal emails, and I'm still rubbish with my personal emails.
Sure.
But I was still bad then, and I missed it. And then they called me, and I didn't. I'm rubbish with voicemails, terrible with voicemails. They'll be like, you have 60 new voicemails.
Right, got it.
I mean. But I actually did play it back. I played one back about a day after it was left, and it was producer Rick McCallum who said, dropped you an email last week and tried to call you, and it's strange that we've not heard back from you. I think basically I don't think nobody ignores, and I wasn't ignoring, I'm just rubbish.
Right. No one ever ignores an email or a phone call from George Lucas.
Yeah, I immediately called them back and apologized, and they just said that they want to know what this Canon 5D Mark II is about, if it's any good. They have Second World War movie that they're currently shooting called Red Tails, and they've got some other plans for other stuff that they just don't know what the quality's like. They've got one, they've messed around with it, but they don't really know much about it. So could I come over to Skywalker Ranch for maybe a few days and give them some advice? And I was like, yeah,
sure. Well,
I was booked on a job.
Oh yeah,
I was booked on a job. It was short notice. It was like, can you come out next week? And I was booked for like 3 weeks. And so I phoned up the production manager of the job I was on and gave this sob story of like, how important Star Wars was to my life. And then eventually got to the bit that I said, and they've asked me to come over there next week to work with them. And she said to me, why didn't you just tell me that at the beginning 10 minutes ago? Yeah, that's fine. I understand totally. No problem. I'll let you off the job.
Oh.
And so I went out there and I shot with it around the ranch, which was I didn't have long to do it at all. And they just wanted to see it. Didn't want me to shoot any test charts or anything like that. They weren't interested in that. They wanted to see what it looked like projected. So I just shot some stuff around the ranch, and I went into the main house and into the screening room. And it was a hell of an experience because it was so it was Rick McCallum there and George Lucas and his visiting director friend Quentin Tarantino and legendary sound designer and editor Ben Burt.
Ben Burt's there.
And so they go into this, and
Dennis Murin didn't show up?
No, he wasn't there. And I cut the stuff on my laptop in the room and went, it looks all right. Bit noisy, a bit of aliasing there, a bit of moire. Oh, it's all right. Oh, God. And I didn't know they were going to screen it on the big screen. So
Sure.
when I took it in there, and it's one of the things I would like to have seen it on the big screen before anybody else saw it, just to check it. So the first time I ever saw Canon 5D Mark II stuff projected was at that point. And it looked beautiful. It looked so much better than it did on the computer through their magical, I don't know what amazing projector they had. It just looked fantastic. And they loved it. So it was a hell of an experience.
And then didn't you get to work a little bit on Red Tails?
Yeah, so I did some shoots. I did some stuff for them up at in Sonoma for a couple of weeks, and then in Prague a few months later as well. So I did about 3 weeks work on the movie, and it was crazy because that was me with my little 5D Mark II, and I also had a 1D Mark IV as well. Did I have a 7D as well? Maybe a 7D. I can't remember. I think I did. I had a 7D modified to PL as well. So I had these 3 cameras to switch between. And they were shooting on Sony F35s. So big beasts and, proper cinema crew. It looks like it's just a monster. So, I would be there to get an angle they hadn't thought of, because I was so nimble and able to just slot in and find things with my eye, what I did. And I was able to be set up and ready within like 2 minutes. And these guys were like 45 minutes to an hour just to repo each position.
Of course.
So it was fun, and it's a fun drinking game watching a movie. But, boy, I can't do it because I would kill myself, because there's 150 shots of mine in the film.
Really?
Yeah.
That's insane.
So I know every single one of the shots when it comes on, and of course they've graded it beautifully, and you couldn't tell. But it's not for what people initially thought of. Oh, you must be using it for like cockpit cameras and stuff like that. I'm like, no, because they're not really the cockpits. They're obviously, it's a stage, and they're on gimbals, and there's a techno crane and in there. So my camera was not for getting those really like small space type stuff. It was really just, I was the small camera to find small spaces and get angles that they couldn't or hadn't thought of beforehand.
Now, would you agree that they found you did they find you because of your blog? And because you were the
Oh,
one kind of talking about DSLRs a lot?
yeah, I think, I mean, without question, it was when the 5D came along, I didn't embrace it straight away. Vincent Laforet did Reverie, of course, in November 2008. And I had I bought the Nikon D90 a month before that, hated it. I was so excited by the concept of DSLRs, having a large sensor to be able to shoot video, but the quality of the Nikon D90 was so bad. And then I saw the 5D Mark II and went, that looks cool, but I have no Canon glass and it only shoots 30p. And I need to shoot 25p and 24p. So this is no good to me. But I did get to try it for the first time in May, and then realized you can get past the lens limitations, and also the fact that there was no manual control by using old Nikon glass with an adapter. And also found a way of converting the 30p to 25p to make it look okay. And so, yeah, so once I figured that out, I really just loved it. And I think that's kind of, a lot of people saw my stuff and saw what I was doing and picked up from there.
Now, because I have a love-hate relationship with DSLRs, because I've graded probably about 5 features that were shot on the DSLRs, and they've never shot properly. If you shoot the DSLR properly, like you did on Red Tails, I'm sure it looks, and I know I saw the movie, it looks great. But most people don't know how to shoot DSLRs properly. It gets too grainy. Like one movie I had was like in the woods at night with no light. And they're like, hey, why is there so much grain? I'm like, guys, it just couldn't work. So what tips do you have with shooting DSLRs? Now, the DSLRs also that you shot Red Tails with are much different than they are now, with the A7S II that can literally look into the darkness of hell and still stay clean. But what kind of tips do you have when shooting DSLRs for filmmakers who want to shoot a feature or a short and try to get the most out of that camera?
It's funny, and it has been quite a few years now since they first came out, and the image quality has come on enormously. But the key core principles that we need to stick to are very much the same. You need to, if you're going to use a handheld, you need to have it on some sort of rig just to stabilize a little bit, because unless you have one of these 5-axis stabilized sensors, then that's going to help you as well. But that's one of the first things, is just make sure if you are going to shoot handheld, just be aware of the terrible issues we can have with rolling shutter, which is a huge giveaway for DSLRs, is that horrible micro vibrations that we can really see. Not just jello, not just like rolling shutter. You said that, I'm talking about, it really looks like, oh my God, like somebody's had too much caffeine while they're holding the camera. So be careful of that. Use an IS lens, image stabilized lens if you haven't got that. But it's know what your camera performs best at with its ISOs. And yes, many of the cameras, the A7S II, you can push your camera much higher. But you still need to expose correctly. So that's one of the things that people aren't doing right. And I do not recommend shooting log format on any of the DSLRs with 8-bit codecs, which is pretty much all of them except the GH5. And even then, it's still a little bit challenging. It's a hell of a codec. The GH5 log, it's really hard to grade. So I would suggest know how far you can push your ISO. And then only use it for extreme purposes. It's not a replacement for lighting. It's a way of hopefully being able to film in environments that you couldn't normally film in. That's basically what DSLRs were excited to me about, was apart from the size and the optics, was I think it was the ability to push that low light up a little bit like that. And I think when the A7S II came out, or the A7S came out initially, it wasn't the fact that I could film in moonlight. It was the fact that I could film in street light but not wide open, which is what too many people are still doing when shooting on DSLRs. That's the other tip, is just because you've got an f1.4 lens doesn't mean you should shoot at f1.4 for every single shot. Right. It's incredibly hard to keep focus. We do have some cameras coming out now with pretty decent autofocus, but it's still not necessarily the way to go. That's a different thing. I would use that for certain things like interviews and stuff like that. Other than that, it's being sensible with it, being sensible. So I would say the key things are going to be, don't be shooting wide open, keep your camera stable if you can as much as possible. Don't push your ISO too far, and don't fall into temptation of shooting log unless you absolutely have to. You know, proper video cameras with 10-bit codecs to shoot log, fantastic. But 8-bit compressed codecs, whether it's a drone or a DSLR, it's a nightmare. And you spend so much time in post just trying to hide all the problems, which if you hadn't done that in the first place, you wouldn't be doing.
Now, one thing I really do like about your work is that you are, at least it seems from your blog and from your YouTube channel, that you are not married to any one camera. You're not like, I'm only the Canon guy, I'm only a Blackmagic guy, I'm only a Nikon guy, I'm only an Arri guy. You use multiple cameras depending on your job. Can you suggest or show people how, or advice on how you could pick the right camera for the right job, which I think is so important, because I think sometimes they're just trying to use a hammer to screw in a light bulb. It's like just because you love that hammer, there are other tools.
Yeah, I mean, that's back in the Canon days, I was approached to be one of their ambassadors, and I said no because I didn't want to be tied to any format. I had an independent voice. I didn't want to lose that. And I also didn't want to lose out on the fact that other people are going to make cool cameras and they're fun. I don't want to be like, oh no, I can't use this because I'm signed up with these guys. And so I'm always going to be like this because I'm very fickle, and I will fall in love with a camera, and then something else will come along and turn my head and go, oh, I'm going to use this now. And so, I mean, when it comes to like photography, my main cameras are Pentax and Fuji cameras. And so, but when it comes to video, my main video cameras are Sony, but I also have Canon ones as well. And I have lots of different types of them. And I guess I am lucky that I can be in that position of saying the right tool for the right job. And obviously, if you've only got one camera, then you are going to be a little bit stuck, and kind of that's your camera for the job. But if it's important, then I would certainly try, and rent it or find somebody who's got something that would be more appropriate for your job. Because you're right, it's you see people using totally the wrong cameras. And when it can be something as simple as you can have a chuckle about it, but somebody trying to use a Blackmagic Ursa Mini for wedding videos. I'm like, you're crazy.
What
are you trying to do? Yeah, but I can shoot RAW. I'm like, why are you shooting RAW in the first place for a wedding video? And a camera that you can't put over 800 ISO. And a wedding video with no control of your lighting and probably no lights?
Sure.
You're crazy. Get yourself an A7S II.
Right.
And so somebody who's, I want to do, some visual effects, and it's all going to be green screen and stuff like that. And I'm shooting on an A7S, and I'll be like, well, why? That's the wrong camera for you for doing this.
Right.
You should get yourself Blackmagic Ursa Mini, because that shoots RAW and that shoots 10-bit ProRes, and that's going to be much better for you, and it's still pretty cheap. And it's already lit because it has to be, because in a studio and green screen, so you don't have to worry about the fact that you can't push your ISO.
Right.
So, I mean, that's the best thing about like the Blackmagics is working in lit, controlled locations. They do really well at that, as long as you don't have to push it too far, because they're the cheapest cameras I know of that have a terrific inbuilt codec of ProRes.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
And have RAW if you need it. Having to deal with all of these nasty compressed B-frame codecs all the time, 8-bit ones. When you get a camera that just shoots straight ProRes, you're like, oh, no transcoding. Oh, my edit system works with it, and I can grade it. It doesn't fall apart. Wow, fantastic. So that's kind of what you need to look at is what. But if you don't have the camera, then it's a bit harder. I mean, interestingly, I was reading Facebook today, and a DP guy I know, and he was asking about time lapse. He's got a red Epic W, and he's complaining about the fact that the time-lapse ability of the camera is basically lacking, in that you can't do more than 1 frame a second. And so you can't do long exposures. Right tool for the right job. This is a $70,000, whatever it is, camera.
Right.
Just get a $2,000 DSLR, and that's going to shoot raw, shoot long exposure, shoot for everything you wanted to. Totally the right job, and it doesn't tie up your $70,000 camera doing a time lapse. So
Yeah, I
think that's kind of the best thing.
Yeah, I think a lot of times filmmakers, DPs, they spend 70 grand on a camera and they want it to do everything and be perfect for everything. And a lot of times you're right. You have that ability and your work has shown it that you could just like, you know what? I have a $70,000 camera, but it's like I have a Porsche, but I'm not going to drive to the supermarket with the Porsche where I could easily either just walk or drive my Prius. It's just the right tool for the right job kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I suppose if you have spent 70,000, you're kind of insistent on the fact that, oh my God, I'm going to get every single last penny's worth out of this camera.
Right.
But I said this in many times, and I've also got this policy now of not wanting to. I'm never going to buy a camera over $10,000 again, and I've done that like 3 times now.
Yes.
Before that, and now it's just. There's loads of great cameras sub 10,000.
Oh God, yes.
Which do so much. And if you need anything more, then just rent it, because it's just not worth it. Because they get superseded so quickly these days, and it's just not really worth spending all that money, especially in a system that you could end up changing. Reds require so many bits and pieces, and maybe then you'll switch to ARRI. Who knows? But I just think there's so many great cameras out there for the sub that, and just stick with that. Really, unless you're super rich, because I bought a Sony F55, and that was the last time I bought a really expensive camera, and I loved it. It was amazing. And then the FS7 came out, and it did everything I needed it to do for documentaries without me worrying about my hugely expensive camera being potentially damaged and stuff like that. So I found that it was sitting on the shelf for like 6 months, hadn't really been touched, and the FS7 was being used all the time. And so I sold it. And that was when I decided, this is silly. I should never, I'm not going to buy a big expensive camera again. So, because the FS7 did everything I needed it to. It didn't shoot RAW easily, but didn't matter because I didn't need to shoot RAW. Most people didn't need to shoot RAW. So yeah, the right tool.
Yeah, and I'm a huge fan of the Blackmagics. I shot my feature on the 2.5K cinema. Yeah. And the Pocket is arguably some of the most beautiful images come out of that little camera. Again, right tool for the right job. If I'm going to go shoot an IMAX, this is not the tool for you. But if you're creating this kind of almost Super 16 style film look out of the box, that little pocket camera is amazing. And the Ursa Mini is one of the most underrated, I think, cameras out there, because it's not as sexy as the Red or the Alexa. But man, it has a bite. Would you agree?
Yeah, I haven't shot anything properly myself with the 4.6 Ursa Mini. I really liked what I got with it, though. I had definitely had issues with, from a documentary background, with the fact that with available light, I knew I was going to come a cropper, and there were some quirks here and there which slowed me down. But I thought for the money, the image was fantastic, and I've always found it disappointing that they went originally with the Ursa, which was the craziest camera.
Oh, the Ursa one. Oh, the first one was horrible.
Yeah, that was funny. I mean, I went to trade shows.
Yes.
And I remember the first time I picked it up, I just in front of them, they let me pick it up, and I went, holy crap. And they went, yeah, we don't really consider this a handheld camera. I'm like, what?
What kind of world do you live in?
What is that? A camera should be anything. You shouldn't just we consider this a tripod camera. I'm like, oh blimey. Sure, a studio camera is a tripod camera, but this is crazy.
Sure.
But I just wish they'd developed the pocket camera further. I wish they'd made a version of that, because that really is. I think it's my favorite camera that I bought from them. In size and form. It had loads of issues as well, but what it gave you was astonishing in the package.
I wish they would do 4K. Like if they could do 4K in that little camera with RAW and ProRes and handle the damn battery issue. Just do something better with the battery. You have to plug in a juice box or something like that. Now with a juice box, it'll run 6-7 hours, but still it's like a little bit more bulky. But God, that little camera is good. And the Micro Four Thirds opens you up to so much glass, especially vintage glass. That I'm a big vintage glass guy, and it's gorgeous. It really is gorgeous. It is a wonderful camera.
Yeah, it's just a shame that they didn't really. I know they just seem to just forgotten about it, and they have their micro camera, whatever they call it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just not the same. It's not the same thing. It's so I don't know if they'll ever go back to that. The DS Mini Pro looks. I have never played with it. It looks like it solves many of the operational issues
They
I
have.
had with the previous one. So
They have solved it. I shot a series with it, and I shot with the new one and the old one, both, and they both worked like champs. But the brand new one that they just released with time code on the side and everything, it solved. It's a tank now. It really is a tank, and it's like you're right. If you push it a little too, it's not. I did a test between the Airy Alexa and the Ursa Mini, and I shot them down the middle. And when you shoot them down the middle, man, it's pretty damn close. It's definitely not. You can tell it's not worth spending $80,000 or whatever the Alexa costs now, comparatively, down the middle. No. You just start seeing where the Alexa is worth it when you start pushing her. When you start pushing on the darks and the highlights get clipped a little bit. So if you go a little bit up or down is where you start getting. But if you shoot it down the middle, it's best bang for your buck.
But let me ask you though, if you were given, somebody said, I'm going to swap out your Ursas for Arri Alexas for free. You'd go, yeah, right. Of course you would. We all would. Because they're amazing. But you're right. It's unless... the only people I know who own Alexas, who are smart, bought Alexas, are DPs who rent them to the productions.
Sure, of course.
So those are people who should be buying Alexas. The rest of us should be renting them in when we need them.
Absolutely. Now, do you have any advice on how you test a new camera? Which I know a lot of filmmakers get their cameras and they really don't know how to push it or test it or put it through the ringer a little bit to see if it's even worth it.
Yeah. So for me, it's totally real world. It's taking it out of. I don't work in studios as such. I do work indoors and things like that, but I don't work in studios. So I want to see how it works with unpredictable lighting. I want to see how it operates as a camera. Is how slow it is to figure out. I think the last camera I tested was the Canon C200, and I actually really like it. It's a bit of a strange, quirky camera in that it has a terrific inbuilt ability to record 12-bit RAW internally, and yet the if you can't do RAW, then you have to do an 8-bit 420 codec, which is so bizarre to have no middle ground. But I mean, we all know it's a Canon protecting its other cameras issue,
right?
But it's but other than that, it's actually a really nice image and a really nice camera, and for me, I just wanted to see the things that it was a selling point, really, which was the RAW, the autofocus, and just what that 8-bit codec was like. So those are kind of the headline features I was looking at to see what they're like. And it's like when I'm getting my hands on the EVA1 from Panasonic, what I want to see is what this dual ISO is going to like. What sort of noise levels am I going to get? Because the selling point is that you can shoot in low light conditions by switching to the higher native setting. So I want to see what that's like. So it's I look at the headline features of the camera and go, okay, I need to see what this actually is like. And then as well, do the everyday sort of bread and butter type stuff to see how it actually works for real use. Because obviously you need to, it may well have a really cool feature, but if it doesn't operate as a camera well, just generally, then it's a bit pointless. Right. And it takes me back to when I saw when the Sony A7S came out, and it was going all about how amazing the low light was, and they released a video, and I watched it and I was like, okay, that looks nice. It's nicely shot, and it was like fishermen in Scotland or something, and it was all shot high ISO, and it showed you. I can't remember exactly what it was.
Like 64,000 or something like that.
It didn't look like nighttime. It looked like daytime or something.
Right.
And which was fine, but because it was like that all the way through, I had no sense of what it was doing. And so I got the camera on loan from them just before it was released, and went, all right, I'm going to take this down to Brighton in south of England, and then just really just see what this is like. And so I did a video and I shot it where this is what it looks like to the eye, which is like 800 ISO. And then I shot it at 25,600 ISO, which did turn it into like daylight. And having this ability to do this transition and show, this is what I see and this is what this shows. And that's kind of a way to sell the camera, to be honest with you, because you saw straight away that it was like, now I get it. I get how amazing this is, because I didn't get it before, because everything just looked okay, looked fine. So that's kind of when I'm looking at cameras, I just want to see what makes this special.
Now, what are 3 of your go-to lenses if you're on a desert island?
Ooh.
I know, it's like picking your children.
It's that question. At least you didn't say one. Actually, one's easier. And you didn't tell me which size sensor. Which sensor we're talking here? Full frame.
Let's say full frame.
Okay. All right, then that's easier. So I would say a 50mm is my first lens without question, because it's the relative field of view of what we see with our eyes. So I do love that standard field of view, and I can shoot pretty much everything on that. And then it gets really tricky, because my favorite walk-around lens is a 35mm.
Which brand?
And I love that.
Which brand?
And I don't really have any. You talking about focal length or brands?
Brand, like the Canon, Nikkor.
Oh, damn, this is getting really hard then. Oh God. So if you want really beautiful, sharp images, then the Sigma art lenses are fantastic.
Oh, they're so amazing.
If you want, they're incredible. But if you want some, a little bit more character, then sure, some of the older Nikkors are always good for that sort of thing.
Got it.
Nice and cheap.
Do you use a lot of vintage glass, or do you ever play with it?
Occasionally, not as much as I used to. These days I tend to use a lot more detailed, sharper lenses. But I still do. When I'm doing any lens whacking, free lensing, I'm using my old vintage glass, and a lot more for stills. I do for stills as well. But for video, probably less so. But I don't really. Oh, it's a horrible question to ask, because I love long telephotos as well.
Sure. It's the right tool for the right job. I know. It's like it's a tough question. If someone asks me, I have a couple of lenses that I go to all the time, and there's a couple of fun ones that I play with. Like I have.
Canon got a great one that I've recently bought. 70-300.
Yes.
It's not a standard constant aperture. It's not their white one. It's their non-L series one, but it's new-ish, like last year. And it's not that expensive. It's got crazy fast autofocus for doing stills, and build quality is great. It's light, and the optics are great, and it gives you a huge range. So
70-300. What's the
70,
how fast is it?
It's 3.5 to 5.6, I think.
Okay, so it's outdoors.
It's an outdoor lens, but if you want a lens which is you're going to limit me to 3. I'm going to cheat with a big long zoom that's going to cover a big range.
Got it.
I still have a fast 50mm for my primes, and then wide angles. I love my big wide angles as well, but my biggest wide angle I've got that is not fisheye is 10mm, which is ridiculous. And that's a Voigtlander for E-mount.
Oh, you have one of Voigtlander. Nice.
And it's Voigtlander make amazing glass. I have to say
they do.
But that 10mm is like, I bring it with and I put it on and I take a couple of shots with it. I think I've shot video with it twice, maybe briefly.
Sure.
Because it's too wide. It's just ridiculous. It's an effect lens. So my favorite focal length for doing wide is actually around 24 mil.
Oh, really?
I do like wider than that, but it can just find myself it can be a little bit too wide. So 24 is a good sort of middle ground. Like Sigma make a great 24mm 0.4. They make a 20mm as well.
Their 18-35 is amazing. Their art lens.
Yeah, if you've got for crop sensors, that 18-35 is fantastic.
Yeah.
So
that
gives you your 24 to your 24-70 full frame equivalent. So it's a great lens.
Now, if you want to talk about wide, my favorite wide I have is the Canoptic 5.7 micro four thirds, but it doesn't fisheye.
That's impressive, isn't it?
It's the Kubrick lens. It's what he shot. The big brother of that is the 9.8, which is for 35. That one is for 16. Right. So I use it with the pocket, and with the pocket, it just it's amazing. But it doesn't fisheye. So if you remember the scenes from The Shining, that's all shot with a canoptic, as well as the right before the rape scene in Clockwork Orange. That was shot with the canoptic. It was one of his go-to lenses in his series, but it's gorgeous. It's such a gorgeous lens. Sorry, we're geeking out.
No, that's cool. No, I mean, I do love my wide angles, and as I say, I bought the 10 and stuff like that. But a sort of like a 1635 zoom is always a good.
Yes.
You know, it's one of these things. If people ask for advice and they say, "What 3 lenses should I buy?" My advice tends to be, of course, first question is, how much money have you got? Right. There's no point giving them any advice, because it's such a, it's an impossible question to answer unless they give you a budget.
There's lenses, and what camera are you going to be using it on, and what are you going to do? Shooting film or video? Or photo or motion? It's a very big question. Has multiple answers. Now, do you have any tips? Go ahead.
Yeah, just with the 5D, it hasn't really changed. It's from 5D. It's simply, you have these three zooms: your 1635, your 2470, your 70-200. That covers everything, and then you have a fast prime for everything else, your 51.4, and that's kind of what you need to go. But that's thousands, It's if you're shooting documentaries, you kind of want that flexibility. If you're shooting features and narrative type stuff, then you can shoot on primes and not. Because the joy of a zoom is the speed, which you need when you're shooting documentary. You don't have to worry about that. Then you can go with cheaper, more vintage primes. So it's a massive question.
Yes. That's a whole podcast in itself.
Yeah.
Now let's talk a little bit about your Masterclass, your new course that you put together for MZ.
Yeah.
Can you talk about what the course is about and what students can expect in the class?
Yeah, it's I would say it's pretty much my 27 years of experience and knowledge, as much as possible, just distilled into effectively what is like 9 episodes, 1, 3, 1, and 8 main episodes. It runs to 9.5 hours or so. And it's I just wanted, initially MZ asked me to do something about drones, and I went, yeah, cool, but I don't think that's going to be. There's no way I can possibly fill much more than a couple of hours just on that. And I said, then I made the mistake of suggesting, what if we did it about everything that I do, every type of filming style that I do? And they went, yeah, cool. And so then I realized just what I was letting myself in for, because I started breaking it down. Before I should have done that before I suggested it to them. And initially it was going to be a 6-hour course. And by the time I started editing, I was like, guys, it's going to be a lot longer than 6 hours, because I knew that when I was filming it, that it was going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. Because once you start talking about a subject, you realize you need to go down a path. So when I was breaking it down in pre-production as to what we needed to do and figuring out which episodes, what topics we should cover, that was kind of, where I realized, it was a very good thing to actually make discipline-wise, because it did require a lot of pre-production. Otherwise, it just was not going to be a practical thing to shoot, because it's big enough as it was. And so I went through the topics that I really wanted to cover. The first one is the first episode is quite dull in respect, because it's just me in my kitchen, but it's me explaining all of the stuff you actually do need to understand before you go out and shoot, which is all the technical stuff, a little bit of history as to why we're using these cameras, and some of the problems we can have with them. So it's going through everything you needed to know, squeezed into like an hour and 20 minutes. And then I went out, and then I realized the next episode was, okay, now I've got all that stuff out of the way. I can just focus on being creative. And then I've never really, composition is one of these things that's been very natural to me. And I've always been asked, so how can I improve my composition? And I'm always like, oh, well, you can always read books and to understand what you're looking for composition. But then you need to experiment, and then you need to watch movies and TV shows and see how they do things and see what you like. And And so that's kind of what the first episode, so the second episode was all about showing what different lenses do and showing how cool a long telephoto can be on a subject, and bringing a background closer to a person and the effect it can have compared to, say, a standard lens and a wide angle lens. And then showing people how to move the camera, when not to move the camera, showing all these toys that can distract you, when to use them. I mean, it was just, there's so much in this course. And I think it's one of these things that if you look at the list of the topics, that only really explains half of what you're learning, or not even that, from just what it is. So like people will say, oh, there's no episode on lighting. I'm like, well, no, because lighting is in every episode. Same with sound.
Sure.
Sound is in every single episode. I didn't want to do one because it's all filmed on location. I want to tackle things real world, much like I always want to do my reviews. And it was like an extension of that. I wanted to show, okay, so I'm going to do this episode's about interviews. So this is how you deal with going to a location, and you don't have the right room. You've got to work with the light. What are the issues with the light? What's the problems with the sound we have here? What could our background be? And it was really trying to take things as realistically as possible, and literally having real problems that I had to solve during the actual shoot, and showing them how I would deal with it. So that was kind of what I was trying to get with it.
Well, I'm excited to watch it myself, and I will definitely put all the information in the show notes for this episode for everyone to take a look at. Now, I have a few more questions if you have some time.
Sure, yeah.
Sure. You've traveled pretty much all over the planet at this point in your career. Do you have any travel hacks for filmmakers?
In what respects?
In the words of traveling, packing, getting things through. I mean, like, getting cheaper deals, or even being able to pack all your gear, what gear to bring, what don't overpack.
Yeah.
Everything. Like, there's a bunch of stuff. Any tips at all? Because I know.
Yeah.
In today's world, traveling with a bunch of gear and keeping it safe, and you're walking around with $20,000 in your backpack. It's like it's pretty rough.
It's the worst thing about my job by far is the traveling. It's not it's the traveling bit itself. It's not being in other places. That's the coolest bit.
Sure.
It's the getting there is the worst bit.
It is.
And it's the most stressful thing is packing and figuring out what you need, your weight allowances. And whenever I'm booked on jobs, I need to look at flight routes and see who flies there, because I know which airlines have the better baggage policies. You're lucky you live in the States and you think you have bad baggage policies there. You do not. Yours are great. Even your worst baggage allowance policy with an airline is amazing compared to what we have to deal with here. There's like 2 airlines that fly out, the UK airlines, which are British Airways and Virgin Atlantic, who charge you per bag. Everybody else charges you per kilo.
Oh my!
So that is where things start getting crazy expensive. So I think the most I've ever spent on excess baggage, probably about £3,500 each way.
£3,500?
Yeah, and it was a job in Japan, and the client had insisted on flying via Amsterdam with KLM, and KLM charge per kilo. And I told them this is going to be expensive, and they didn't listen to me, and then they had to pay it. And so you choose the airlines for a reason. It's worth if you're flying internally in the US. So if I'm flying to the US, you get like 2 bags as your minimum allowance. But if you fly anywhere else from London, you get 1 bag. So I guess you guys have just managed to negotiate a better thing.
And we think it's horrible. It's absolutely atrocious.
Yeah. It's worth if you can get some media accreditation, because there's a number of airlines which give you better deals.
Sure.
Southwestern, Delta, United, a couple of others. There's a few of them out there which, if you've got proper media accreditation, can save you a lot. I mean, Delta will also, are quite good in that they will let you, I think it's like $50. It'll probably change. It's like $50 per bag, up to £100, which is crazy. But just remember that the important stuff always has to be carried with you. And we're supposed to carry our lithium-ion batteries as carry-on luggage. So know your rights with the airlines, because I guarantee you they don't know your rights. So they will tell you something and like, actually, no, if you look at the policy on your website, this shows you what you're allowed. And they go, oh, let me check on and they go, and then they'll confer with somebody else. So this happens all the time. So you need to understand what you are allowed and what you can't do. If it comes to batteries, you've got to be careful about the watt hours you have on some of the drone batteries, some of the larger camera batteries. You can only take like 2 per person. So make sure you fly with somebody else who can help you out with that. I do check a lot of expensive stuff. You have to, because of your carry-on limits and what you can take.
Sure.
And I don't use Pelican cases. The simple reason being is, yes, they offer great protection, but they look expensive. And stealable. And so my luggage looks really unfilm gear-like. It's still really protected inside. It just doesn't look like it from the outside. It looks like average luggage. And if you can get the pinkest, most colorful, garish-looking luggage with Hello Kitty stickers on, do it. Do it, because it doesn't look valuable and nobody's going to steal it.
That's great advice, actually. That's awesome advice.
Really, yeah. I really think Pelican should make a series of
pink.
Yeah, when I have had to fly with these hard cases, whether it be like for a Mobi or a drone, or like an Inspire, then I cover them with stickers, like superheroes and stuff like that. Really do. My those hard cases have got Superman stickers on everything. It just doesn't look like professional film gear anymore. Try to disguise it as much as possible.
Got it.
It's a big old topic, and it's a difficult one, and then you get, because certain countries will need you, if you're taking professional film gear in, to have a proper document, a carnet, which costs a lot of money, and you need to have everything itemized and listed. But some countries won't accept that, and you have to negotiate with them beforehand or find out what you needed to have there. And this is why sometimes it's really nice just to go with a small DSLR style camera and just try and not be obvious. If it's difficult or too expensive to have that, then it's try and go in. But you are always going to have a risk if you are doing a paid job and you trying to cut corners and not get a carnet and go as a tourist and not get the correct visa, and your gear gets stopped and doesn't get brought in. That's your fault. And it's just one of these things. If you're doing it for a client, you have to pass on these costs to them, explain to them, okay, well, we're going here and we need this. And it's just one of the things. Flying is just absolutely horrendous. And, I'm reading every day, there's always a new story about how the FAA or whoever it is are going to change what we can check.
Yeah, I know.
And they're saying anything with any lithium-ion battery cannot be checked. And then no camera can be checked, and it's kind of like no professional electronic gear can be checked. I'm like, at some point soon, if this goes down this road, I don't think we'll ever be able to fly abroad with our gear anymore. We'll just have the era of the rental company is going to be there, because everybody's going to have a major rental outlet in every single city in every single place, because we can't fly with anything, which would be terrible if that ever happens. But I hate it. I hate it so much. I always bring too much. So the best advice I say is just make a list beforehand, and just bring what you need. Maybe a couple of backup things as much as possible. Like if you shoot, I always have a second camera just in case. But kind of the obvious stuff, really.
Okay. Batteries. Always bring extra batteries.
Oh, God, yeah.
Batteries. Now, what advice would you give a filmmaker wanting to break into the business today?
I guess the first question is, why do you want to? As long as you're doing it for the right reasons, then that's great. it's not, you know very well, it's not a business to get rich into. It's a
I was going to
business
say, it's not rich and famous. That's not the reason why to get in.
Oh, no. Go and become a banker or something. I don't know.
Right.
If you just want to do something creative because you get into it because you want to be creative.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's my best advice to start with. And it's a tricky thing. It's one of these things that, and I think this is kind of partly why it's so good to have this course that I've done with MZ, is whilst it's not a film school replacement, it condenses all of my knowledge into this one thing. So if people watch it, then they can get, you're not going to become a filmmaker from watching this, but you're going to get a lot of knowledge from it and hopefully use that knowledge to find your own style and voice and know how to do things a bit better. Because that's what you're going to need to do. You're going to need to be patient, which a lot of people aren't these days. There's too much wanting stuff to happen overnight. And I think my best example of this was a guy did. So I do some private tuition with people. I remember this guy emailed me saying he wanted to make a short film to be entered into next year's Cannes Film Festival. And he wanted some training for that. I'm like, interesting. Okay. So I asked him to tell me. So it's a really strange way of actually wording things. Anyway,
yes.
I want to make sure.
I'm gonna submit it to the Oscars. I can submit it to the Oscars.
Yeah,
right?
I'd like to win an Oscar, so I'd like to do some training with you. Like, right. Well, I've not won an Oscar, so I'm the wrong person. So don't come to me. Right. But I said to him, so what is it? What do you want to do? So what do you want to learn from? So I want to get a grounding of things which can help me be able to make this film. So what experience do you have? None. I've never used the camera. I've never made a film.
Oh God!
But I've seen lots of films.
Oh.
So I then said to him, well, I don't know how long you're expecting training-wise from me, but
you got 10 years.
Can I ask what sort of how long do you expect? What do you want from me exactly? And he said, maybe how much would it cost for 2 hours of training?
Oh my God, you got to be kidding me.
I replied to him and went, that's not going to be enough. And then he replied saying, well, what about 4? And that's where the conversation it felt like a practical joke. Uh-huh. But it wasn't. It was being deadly serious.
Right.
And it's one of the things you've got to be so patient with, and you've got to work your ass off.
For years.
Yeah, absolutely for years before you're. When I left Sky, I was senior cameraman, and I couldn't go any further at the company without going into management and leaving the camera behind. Mm-hmm. And then when I left, I didn't want to do news anymore. Mm-hmm. So I had to start completely again from the bottom. And it took me 4 years to start getting the work that I really wanted to do.
Even after being 17 years in another aspect of the business.
Exactly. So it's, and now there's a huge amount of more competition than there was even 11 years ago.
Oh God.
So you've got to be really patient, and you've got to be, obviously you've got to have talent. You've got to have the ability to sell yourself as well. And it's not something to be embarrassed about or not talk about. It's a business after all. Any job where you are selling yourself and your skills, it's business, and you have to be able to sell yourself. I remember I worked with this guy who was such a talented director and filmmaker, but wasn't doing anywhere near the work he should be because he just was a terrible salesman. Mm-hmm. So you've got to have that skill as well. Find good people to work with. Try and network as much as you can with people. I'm not sure, a Facebook group is not the same as proper networking, whilst it can be useful. It's just there's so much noise on there. Mm-hmm. It's become so diluted. It's much, much, much harder to find clear voices.
Yep.
To listen to. But at the end of the day, if you can make it in this as a business, then it's a career, then fantastic, because it is, for me, it's the greatest thing in the world to be able to be able to do what I would do if you weren't paying me and pay me for stuff as well. That's great. But you've got to understand that most of the time that you get paid, you won't like what you're doing. You won't like the work that you're producing.
Yes.
And you
Amen.
have to
Amen.
accept that and let it go, and then do stuff for yourself to have that creative fulfillment. Because when you're doing a corporate for some guy, you're gonna look at it and go, oh God. And they're gonna tell, you're working for them. They're not hiring you to make a Philip Bloom film. They're hiring you to
Right.
make a film. They're the client. You make it for them,
Right.
and yeah, you've got to make it as good as you possibly can. They probably come to you because they've seen something that you've done.
Right.
But at the end of the day, you are going to find that you are not going to love what's been done with what you've made necessarily, or what's been done with your work at the end. And you just have to accept that and move on.
Now,
And you always still give everything to it, just because it is not.
Yes.
It's a crappy little thing. Still give everything to it, because you can still be creative. You can still get so much out of it yourself. And when you get home, you don't feel like, oh my God, what a terrible day. I had to film this worst call center ever. It was awful lighting and blah, 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 blah. That's fine. But if you made an effort and made it look good, then you can come home and go and you pour yourself a drink and go, I deserve this because I made that look good, and you're happy. You don't want to come home and feel bitter ever.
Oh God, yes, and there are a lot of bitter filmmakers out there, without question, because they fall into that trap. And when I spoke to, I worked with Robert Forrester, and he gave a great piece of advice, which is like, no matter how small the job, give it 110%, because you never know who's watching. You never know who's on set or who will see that work and maybe hire you for another job somewhere else.
Even that client, they may give you this really terrible job.
Yep.
And then they see, oh my God, this was really bad, and I can't believe how good you made this. You're perfect for this job that we have for 6 months in the Seychelles.
Right.
I'm like, oh, all right, great.
And now you never know. You never know.
Yeah,
now,
you never know what you're going to get.
Now, what's the lesson that took you the longest to learn, whether in the film business or in life?
Don't kill yourself with work. Set yourself time where you stop. Now, my edit suite I have a home edit suite, which is financially convenient and obviously nice and handy. There's no commute for me when I'm editing, but that divide between work and life is really difficult. And so when I am editing, apart from, when I was cutting the MZ series, mind you, I had to break this most times because I was working stupidly long hours editing. But for most jobs, I kind of set myself, if it's with 6 a.m. to 7 p.m., I'm like, okay, no more work after 7, and be disciplined about it. Disciplined at your start time, disciplined about your finish time, and make sure you give yourself time to see your girlfriend, your wife, boyfriend, your husband, your friends, your children.
Sure.
Make sure you have a life. I very rarely work weekends now, unless the shoot demands it, or I have to go somewhere. So I will down tools at weekend. Yeah, you'll still find me with a camera. You'll still find me flying a drone or taking photos somewhere. But that's me. That's my own time. And if you can, find yourself a girlfriend who likes doing it with you. It's always good. So, my girlfriend Sarah loves shooting, and she loves all that stuff as well. So that really does help. But I think it's really important to get your work-life balance right. And it took me probably about 20 years or so to start realizing how off it was.
Yes. And
now I work way less than I used to.
Right.
I probably work half as much as I used to 2 years ago. So yeah, I earn a lot less, but I'm a lot happier.
And that's really priceless.
It is priceless. It also makes my work better because I'm happier.
Yes. Very good lesson.
I think that's probably the best thing I've learned. It took me a long time to learn it. I'm very stubborn, but I eventually figured it out.
I feel you 100%. I do exactly all those things. I don't work weekends, and I have a specific time I come in and a specific time I come out every day. And because everyone always asks, how do you create so much content? How do you, run this big blog and do all the stuff you do and have twins and have a family and all this? Like, you gotta You got to do exactly what you said. Got to be very strict with yourself. And
I'm impressed. I mean, you got kids. I mean, I haven't even got kids yet, and I don't even know how I'll cope with having kids as well. Apart from I'll probably just film them a lot.
yes, they would probably be the most documented children in history, without question.
I think they probably will, yeah.
And last question, what are 3 of your favorite films of all time?
Oh, that's an impossible question to
I
answer,
know,
isn't
it's
it?
just today. Today, what do you feel like today?
Oh, I still got to go with Empire Strikes Back is always in my top 3.
Absolutely.
It was that was one of the first films I ever saw as a kid where I still remember the emotional reaction I had coming out of that. And it's still watch it today and I still feel, wow, this is incredible. I'm also a huge Alfred Hitchcock fan.
Yes.
And find it difficult to pick a favorite, but again, I think for the emotional impact, and maybe it's another film with a downer ending, and that's Vertigo.
Oh, yeah.
But it's just such an incredible film in every way. God, I think I'm just thinking of all my favorites all have such downer endings. I don't know why. I actually like happy endings of films. I like things I don't want to feel like I felt at the end of Seven every time I see a film.
Wow, I know, right?
Just like,
or Fight Club,
that's Fincher for you.
That's any Fincher movie. Yeah.
Gone Girl. I'm like, holy crap! The worst date film of all time.
Yes, they are. It is actually the worst date film of all time.
It really is.
Or Fatal Attraction and Fatal Attraction.
You'll break up.
Fatal Attraction.
Okay, break up now.
Sure.
Yeah, that's not a good one as well. And I guess, I don't know. I think maybe something more recent. I don't know, but of the films I've seen recently, another one that had a really good emotional impact on me was Denis Villeneuve's Arrival last year.
Yeah, that was actually really interesting. That's such an interesting film to watch.
It's not my favorite film, but it was my favorite film of the year. And I saw Blade Runner 2049 last week, and that was again incredible.
Oh yeah, I saw that too.
He's an amazing filmmaker, but I always tend to go back to the same films I end up watching again and again and again, whether it's the original Planet of the Apes.
Sure.
I love my sci-fi very much. And then Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Of course.
You can't get a more perfect film than Raiders.
Raiders is perfect.
It is a perfect film.
And since you're a Hitchcock fan, have you seen the new documentary 7852?
No, I have not.
Have you heard of it?
No, I have not.
I just found out about it the other day. It's on iTunes. I watched it yesterday, and it is an entire documentary about the shower scene in Psycho.
Wow.
And they go through every shot and they talk to everything and the impact of Psycho, but they literally break down everything about that shower scene, which is arguably the 90 seconds, the most important 90 seconds in film history, honestly. Some of the, I mean, what he was able to do in that shower sequence. But someone put together arguably a really good documentary, shot in black and white, by the way. It was gorgeous. It's on iTunes. You definitely should watch it. If any film geek and definitely Hitchcock fan will love it. Yeah.
Anybody who has not seen Psycho, what the hell are you doing?
Why are you listening to us? Go watch Psycho.
You have to watch this film. That is if you take the sections which obviously date the film, which is the beginning and anything outside of just at the motel, it stands up completely today. It could have been made. It's just so incredible. And it's the most innovative filmmaking you'll ever see. And we're talking, was it 1960?
1960.
Yeah, so
we could do a whole episode just on Psycho without question.
Oh God, yeah. I think I might watch it tonight, actually.
Now, where can people find you and your work?
So my website is philipbloom.net. So it's PHILIPBLOOM. And my blog is there. And that is the same. Philip Bloom is what I have for all of my social media, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. It's just
MySpace, GeoCities. I'm sorry.
It probably is still there.
Yeah, mine's is too. Probably I haven't checked
I didn't think I ever really used it as such.
Right.
But it's one of the things I do have. But yeah, so it's pretty simple to find me. And I'm quite active I'm pretty active on them, and it is a real mixture of photography, filmmaking, and personal stuff. I do put personal stuff on social media, and that's kind of another. It's a whole podcast is about
Yes.
your whole dividing line between
Yes.
this sort of thing, and I think it's important to be you on social media, and that's why I always say in my bio, silly, grumpy. So depending on how I'm feeling, I will be like that, and I put some personal stuff up there, and I put some everything I try to make as nice as possible. I have a nice mix, and I just try and make it feel as me as it is. Like the MZ course, it's me. What you see is very different to anything else you'll ever see training wise, because it's very personal, and I kind of think it just kind of sums me up really in how I like to share things.
Philip, man, thank you so much for taking the time out. It's been an absolute joy speaking to you, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
I can't tell you what an absolute thrill and pleasure it was to talk to Philip. And after reading his blog for so long and listening to him on YouTube, and I mean, if you need to know about camera gear and reviews about camera gear and things like that, man, I definitely check his website out. I'm going to leave all his links in the show notes at indiefilmhustle.com/208. And as promised, link to his amazing online course. Just go to indiefilmhustle.com/bloom. That's BLOOM. indiefilmhustle.com/bloom. Like I said, it's almost 10 hours. And as a special gift to the tribe, you get to watch the first lesson for free. And he goes over so many things in this course, things I wish I would have learned or would have known about when I first started out in the business. And you don't even have to buy the entire course. If you just want to buy modules of the course, like visual storytelling, how to do interviews, slow motion, time-lapse, aerial cinematography with drones, how to really work with story, post-production, or just the basics, lens whacking, things like that, you can buy them per module or you can buy the entire course. I say get the entire course. It's definitely well worth it, guys. And I wanted to take a quick second before we go to thank you all for emailing me and giving me all these amazing emails and letters about how the podcast and the work that I'm doing with Indie Film Hustle has affected your lives. It really means a lot to me. I'm really, really grateful and humbled every time I get an email. I try to email everybody back. I try to return everybody's letter in one way, shape, or form. I'm only one guy, so I do the best I can. But I want to just publicly say thank you again so much. And I will keep doing this as long as I can because I know how much it really helps you guys out there. And please spread the word about the podcast, about the blog, about the YouTube channel, about everything we do at Indie Film Hustle so we can help as many filmmakers, as many screenwriters, as many artists as we can with the knowledge that I'm trying to put out into the world and the good, positive energy that I'm trying to put out into the world and helping you guys all out. So again, thank you very much. I truly, truly appreciate it. And as always, keep that hustle going. Keep that dream alive, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Indie Film Hustle podcast at indiefilmhustle.com. That's INDIEFILMHUSTLE.com.